It sounds beautiful there.
Gorgeous.
Okay, so it is 11 o'clock. Here we go. Welcome everybody to our next Voices, Visions, and Advocacy talk hosted by IAMAS. And today we decided to take a little bit of a pivot from our last 3 COVID talks that were super serious. And I wanted to make sure that we are seeing the brighter and lighter side of things. And that's why we have Meredith Masony and Dr. Maki Motapanyane, sorry about that, with us today. And we are talking about motherhood and humor, and probably a splash of COVID will hit in there someplace, but mostly we're here to celebrate and kick off Meredith's new book, which is going to be reversed on your screen, but we're super excited about that. And it is called Ask Me What's for Dinner One More Time, Inappropriate Thoughts on Motherhood. And Meredith has more than 4 million followers, and she doesn't mind sorting through the dirty laundry of motherhood by sharing with the world the stains that many of us try to hide. In her new book, she has a collection of essays, and I wanted to point out that 2 people that are here today are going to win one of those books. We'll have a drawing, no drum roll, because I don't have a drum and I refuse to buy my child this drum set that he wants, but we can do this, and we'll do that a little bit later. But to kick us off, we have Dr. Maki Motapanyane, who is a longtime IAMAS member. I first heard her speak at an international conference a couple years ago, and she did an excellent talk on the subversive nature of mother comics. And so when we decided to put this together, she was the first person I thought of to sort of step back and give us the 40,000-foot view of kind of why female comics and mother comics specifically are subversive in nature, and why we find them funny, and what they sort of, how they interject in sort of the traditional view of what motherhood is and how we think of ourselves as mothers and all of those good things. So with no further ado, I am going to hand it right on over.
All right. Thank you, Katie. I'm so delighted to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. I was so excited when I saw the theme of the event today. It's been a little while. I think it's been at least, I'm going close to a year now of not having looked at this material. I'm working on a book on the subject of moms in stand-up comedy in Canada and the US. So really delighted to be here. I'm a big fan of Meredith's work on all of the many platforms on which her work appears. And so really excited to have been given the opportunity to introduce Meredith today. And I'll just jump right in, and I'm really looking forward to the following discussion. So Meredith is the founder of the parenting blog That's Inappropriate, which was started in 2014, and the author of the book that Katie just showed us, Ask Me What's for Dinner One More Time, recently published by Gallery Books. Her work across a range of mediums, as I mentioned earlier, is distinctively honest, unvarnished, and often humorous. It's a humorous reckoning with the grinding daily realities of mothering. There is so much cleverness and wit in Meredith's work, for instance, in how she de-romanticizes motherhood without the timid, gendered, and apologetic qualifiers that many of us usually apply to such admissions. For instance, don't get me wrong, I love my children, but, and then in the whispered tone, my kid was a beast today. These hushed tones in which we talk to each other. You know, the absence of this in Meredith's work is bold, and it's refreshingly unapologetic, and the effect is powerful. I'm looking here at one of the videos she posted. It was a Mother's Day themed video when she's looking back into the distance. We're meant to understand she's talking to her child and saying, I'm recording this video, I need you to be quiet. And then she says, do you love your mother? Then listen. So that kind of reversal in terms of the way that we mothers usually talk, we qualify before talking about the grind. We have to say we love our kids. And the way that that's flipped in that moment is really nice. Asking the child, do you love me? And allow me what the space to do what I'm doing. That same Mother's Day themed video then closes with a description of this mother's ideal celebration of the day and what that means to her. And she says, I just want to be left the hell alone. I mean, really. Wonderful, wonderful truth. And again, refreshing, not really focused on presence or anything like that, just space, time. So lovely. Meredith does so much more than humor, using various mediums to cut through the fog of sexist cultural norms that constrain the lives of women and mothers. In this way, she importantly contributes to the ongoing feminist push to shift public discourse and challenge unjust norms of motherhood. For the scope of today's events, excuse me, I focus my comments on the humorous and comedic aspect of such work, which I call maternal humor. This is largely what I've been writing about. So maternal humor is comedy that comes from the subjective experience of mothers and humorous content that centers motherhood and mothering. It has a long history in the comedy industry in Canada and the US. For instance, maternalism in comedy is evident in the early to mid 20th century legacy of Jackie Moms Mabley, who lived from 1894 to 1975, LaWanda Page, who lived from 1920 to 2002, and Jean Carroll, 1911 to 2010, who, by the way, Carroll appeared as a regular comic on the Ed Sullivan Show. That show ran from 1948 to 1971, and it was quite unusual during those years to have a woman comic on those shows, never mind being invited as a regular guest. And then in addition to that, having the content of what she presented there be centering the experiences of motherhood. So, you know, there's a number of sort of really, really neat firsts that she was doing for that show particularly. Likewise, contemporary mother stand-up comics whose material centers motherhood, and we have a couple of more prominent examples like Ali Wong, Christina P., Catherine Ryan, and Amy Schumer, among others. They are charting a newly crafted contemporary frontier in the midst of a reinvigorated and wide-reaching feminist terrain, which is really interesting to look at in this particular moment. So for me, one of the questions that I often think about and get asked with respect to this kind of work is, what is the general difference in how non-mom comedians of every gender make humorous mention of motherhood? And here this includes men comics who are fathers, and the way that mother comics do this. What is the general difference between the way that motherhood is talked about with humor among in these two instances? And principally, maternal humor as expressed and practiced by mother comedians is subject-centered, while the motherhood-related humor of their non-mom peers is object-oriented. Maternal humor is centered in the being of the human who is mothering. Humor about mothers by others is doing-centered, as in mother as the doer who does. So in the first instance, mothers as self define the tasks and roles of mothering. In the second, they are defined by them. This is so in the case of comedians who are dads as well. In the context of a persistently heterosexist, patriarchal cultural context, mother comics subjectivize themselves, their partners, and fathers broadly. Of course they do. Who hasn't absorbed the message that men are full humans? The same is seldom true for dad comedians discussing moms and motherhood, where there is a pattern of conflating task and individual in their discussions of mothers. So currently, as never before, the pregnant body and maternalism are center stage in the stand-up comedy industry that for so long has been a bastion of male-centeredness and anti-femininity. And the landscape of contemporary maternal humor reaches far beyond stand-up comedy. We see it in blogs, YouTube, film and TV, literature, and books, which all hold strong examples of vibrant comedic maternalism. As Meredith's work demonstrates, this active and enormously constructive terrain is pushing against and shifting destructive norms of gender and motherhood, and to great effect. If Meredith's reach and the increasing number of Netflix specials featuring pregnant comics who fill an entire hour with maternal humor are any indication, maternal humor has taken hold, and according with its legacy is influencing the discursive landscape of motherhood and mothering in critically important ways. And I'll leave it there.
Nice, thank you. Well, there was two things. I know that we wanted to get to Meredith doing a quick reading from her book, but I wanted to possibly, if you don't mind, Meredith, jump in and talk a little bit about what Maki was just saying in terms of, in what ways do you see yourself as being subversive, or do you?
Oh, I mean, yes, I feel that from a very young age, as a female, I have been told what I want, how I want it, when I want it, and it frames you in such a way.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, I just assume, you know, you're told you're gonna grow up, you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids, you're gonna become a mom. That's life. Like, you just get on board. And for the most part, I was totally fine with that. But then when I entered into that stage of my life, I felt shafted because nobody told me what it was actually like to do those things and the way I was going to feel. And then when I would tell people the way I felt, I would get told, you can't say that, that's inappropriate. And that's actually where the name came from, that's inappropriate, because I was constantly being told, you don't talk about the children in that tone. You don't talk about your spouse in that tone. You don't discuss these things. Those aren't for a larger audience. It's not what we do. And I was like, well, first of all, who's we? Because I do those things. And I feel like if we collectively as moms and women and wives did more of that, we would feel less alone. And it was very irritating to be told that I was to do all of these things, and I didn't understand why I was being told that. And I felt isolated with motherhood, and I felt like the people who I needed to connect with that were like me, I couldn't find them. And so I decided, after being basically confronted with my own mortality and thinking I was going to die, that it was not only important for me to speak what my truth was and the way I felt about being a wife and a mom and a woman in 2000 and whatever. I felt like I was actually tasked with it for some reason, because I was given a second chance at life. And I know some people think that's like, whoa, don't you think you're super important and special? And it's like, no, I actually just think that if somebody had done this for me, I would have felt much better. My mental health would have been better. My confidence in being a mom and a wife would have been more concrete, because I didn't see those things. And I wanted to. I wanted to know I wasn't the only one at the end of the day with 3 kids under the age of 5 crying in a closet, because I would look around and just realize I'm supposed to do everything for everyone all of the time, but I can't. And I don't know why I can't. And the answer is pretty simple. Nobody can, but nobody wants to fess up to it.
And I think that that's one of the things that the way that what I see as different between mothers and fathers is that sort of self-blame that goes into, and that I'm the failure. Not that our system's just totally effed up. It's just, or that our expectations on moms are totally effed up. It's that, no, somehow I'm the one that's just, look at all these other people making it. She works full time and is baking cookies and has the 3 kids and they're happy. I mean, she's really nice to them all the time, never yells at them, and all those comparisons that are sort of zipping through our head as we're sort of, buying store-bought cookies, if we even remember them, and, kind of hating the fact that we even are having to buy them in the first place, the whole gamut, that's sort of the, who am I supposed to be? What is the world expecting of me? And then yet that pushback of what the reality is and what we're feeling. And I don't see a lot of that in fatherhood, with amongst father comics or really just even part of the conversation around fatherhood. Why do you think that might be, Meredith?
So it's tough because I think that men, when they are boys and they are growing up, they're not told what they want, what they need, how they're going to do it. They're not, those barriers, those constraints, those restrictions aren't put on them. So as they grow, they determine what they want and how they want to do things. And they are somehow, I don't know if it's just they're magically empowered, but I just feel like women aren't given the opportunity to feel and empower in that manner. And I don't know, in an educational realm, like why that is, or like how to really fully articulate what I'm trying to say. But it's kind of like men are given the opportunity from a very young age to know what they want, and people don't question it. When a girl is telling somebody what they want or why, I feel like we don't empower her in that sense. And thus, as she grows, it's always questioned, why are you doing that? Why, you don't like that, and it's like, how can you tell me what I like? And so when I started doing what I do, there were so many questions. And at one point, my husband actually asked me, and I talk a little bit about it in the book, he said, "You're going to leave me, aren't you? You're going to leave me." And I looked at him and I was so thrown by what he had said, because I said, "You're so confused, because this has nothing to do with you. This is about me, and this is what I want, and these are the things that I want to do, and that has nothing to do with how I feel about you or how I feel about my children. This is about something that I need to do." And it was very hard for him, because he assumed that my self-growth or my ability to kind of figure out who I was independently of my children and him, that was threatening. And I don't think that these things happen to fathers per se, maybe because they don't hold this like guilt and shame for just existing and being a woman and a wife and a mom. I don't know, but it's not there for them. And I can only speak to being a mother. I can't speak to being a father because it isn't what I am. I am a mother. But I can tell you that it was very eye-opening for me to hear my husband say these things, because he was intimidated in a certain sense as to my personal growth, to professionally growing and the starting a business, and then starting a second business and a third business and a fourth business, because we do many different things. Yes, I have a presence on Facebook, but we also have a podcast, and I write books, and we sell t-shirts. I design t-shirts. I do all of these different things. And as he started to understand and realize, I want to do this with you, I don't want to do this despite you. There was this thing, and he kind of got on board when he saw these women messaging me and emailing me and saying, I saw what you said today, and I felt it. I felt it in my soul. Like, I've wanted to scream that before, and nobody listens to me. And I said, the first thing you need to do is speak. open your mouth and let it fly out, and you're going to feel better. You might scare some people, but you're going to feel better. But you need to be heard. You know, you need to, and it took me a long time to get to this spot. You know, like I said, I'm going to be 40 tomorrow, but at 34, I started to realize that I was doing a disservice to not only myself, but my children and my spouse by not truly being who I was supposed to be or who I am, because my identity lied solely with being a mother and a wife and not with who I was as an individual. And that's not being the best person or wife or mom. And I think that that's something that happens to us when we enter motherhood, because we're not given the tools to understand how to change that.
So I have two thoughts kind of going back and forth here, because I'm thinking, you know, in a lot of ways, you're very much describing feminist mothering, which you've gotten. And so I'm thinking, you know, you've gotten pushback. I know you've gotten really vile things said about your parenting and mothering and everything. And how do you so that's sort of the part A, but part B, how are you sort of hopefully putting a wedge into what I think you said 2 sons and a daughter, right?
Yep.
So how do you sort of prevent that from carrying forward?
So, you know, my husband is Puerto Rican. And so there are some cultural differences with when we got married, with how he was raised and with how I was raised. And what we have done in our home, you know, I enabled him for probably the first 10 years of our marriage by doing everything all of the time for everyone, because it was what was expected of me. And he was fine with not pitching in or helping out, because he assumed that that was what my role was supposed to be. And when I opened my mouth and started discussing the way I was feeling and how this was just not going to work for me and in our home, and how I didn't want our children, both my daughter and my 2 sons, to think that it was just simply the woman's or the wife's job to do X, Y, and Z, we had some, it was groundbreaking for us, for our relationship, for our family, for the way we did things. But I enabled a behavior because I thought I was supposed to enable that behavior. And you know, things look much different in our household now. You know, we both own and work on this business, but my husband does the grocery shopping and the cooking, and you know, he'll, you know, run errands and do pickups and drop-offs, whereas before, everything under the sun was my responsibility. It was his job to go to work, come home, and be the fun dad on the weekends. And that just didn't work for me anymore. But I did enable, and I talk about it in the book, I enabled the behavior for a while. And now we communicate through these issues. And you know, my sons, they do dishes, because everybody does dishes, because if you ate off the plate and the plate's dirty, you need to clean the dish. Like, everybody needs to help. When the laundry goes onto the couch, you know, everybody can sit and kind of help fold, and, you know, it doesn't have to be me all of the time. So we talk about that. You know, my sons clean their bathroom, my daughter cleans hers. Everybody can help. Everybody can pitch in. A household is many different people. And I tell them, you know, I don't, it sounds, I get a lot of pushback from this as well, but I tell my kids, I think it's great if you go to college, but you don't have to, because there are so many different ways to become educated in this world. If it's a tech school or a training program or whatever, I urge you to get educated and become what it is that you want to be. But I'm not going to tell you what that is, because you are not, a lot of parents believe that their children, well, this is an extension of me, and so I expect this. My expectations are I have 3 kids, so my expectations are not all the way up here for every one of my kids. I expect them to grow up and be kind, good people, but I don't care if that's a college educated person, or somebody who went to a trade school, or somebody who has decided that they're going to go travel Europe for 2 years and bum around because they have no clue what they're going to do. I expect them to be themselves, and I expect them to be kind, and hopefully not bounce back onto my couch at 25. Like, I expect them to be self-sufficient, but I also don't expect them to be what I want them to be. They need to be who they want to be. And that's, you know, it's out of my control. There's only so much I can control as a person.
So you mentioned your book a couple times, and I was wondering if you wanted to read something from your book.
I can. I've not done this yet, so I'm a little nervous.
Oh, no.
I did the Audible version, and I tell you, it was probably the most fun I had in terms of the process of the book, like to be hands-on with it. But I had to stop and start so many times because I would start to giggle or like
Well,
go off on a
totally giggle here.
tell another story, and they're like, you can't tell other stories, those weren't in the book. And I was like, oh, that's right. So
well, you can do whatever you want during this.
so I might giggle a little, but I thought that I would read the Epic Family Road Trip of 2019 because this was a trip literally for the books, and it was in the book because we left Florida and drove in a minivan with our entire family to Salt Lake City, Utah, which is quite a hike in a minivan. So in March of 2019, my husband came to me and said he had an amazing idea. He told me that he wanted to pack up our trusty minivan Rhonda, and he wanted to drive to Salt Lake City, Utah, and back, covering 6,500 miles in 21 days. Yes, my husband's brilliant idea was to take our family of 5 on an epic road trip so that we could make memories that would last a lifetime. Can I curse?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I didn't, just in case there were kids in the audience, but you do you.
Because I don't remember what's in here, but just prepping those little ears. I finally told him that he was ducking insane and that I would happily fly to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then fly home once our trip was done. However, that was not an option. He told me that driving would offer us plenty of opportunities to spend time together, especially since our kids were growing up so fast, and this summer's vacation might be our last big trip because our oldest was going to be in high school. My husband took the reins and started planning the epic family road trip. He spent a few months perfecting the itinerary. He planned all the stops and booked all the hotels. He bought road flares, bear spray, anti-venom kits, first aid kits, and several other items that I would never, ever put into the classification of a vacation item. We left Southwest Florida on June 21st. 3 hours into our trip, just as we were approaching Orlando, our kids asked, "Are we there yet?" for the first time. That's right. 120 miles into a 6,500-mile road trip, these a-holes asked, "Are we there yet?" Well, children, do you see the mountains? For F's sake. That was the first time I saw my husband's eye twitch. It would twitch several hundred more times on the trip, but I will always remember the first twitch. We drove 8 hours that day and made it to our first hotel. It was a Best Western Plus that was clearly a minus. When I opened the door to our room, the carpet was wet and it smelled like someone had set fire to the furniture. I went to the front desk to complain about the smoke and the smell, and the receptionist told me all the rooms were non-smoking rooms. Apparently, the people who stayed last in the room didn't follow that policy, or they were cremating bodies. Either way, I was not going to stay in that room. They moved us to the other side of the hotel. I was tired, the kids were tired, and I was unimpressed with my husband's failure to understand that I had a firm $150 a night minimum price range for a hotel room. I guess he thought I was kidding. We survived the night in the Best Western Minus and got back in the minivan. We made our way through Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana the next day. The epic family road trip was not a vacation. It was 24 hours a day of incarceration. Our epic family road trip was, in fact, a never-ending episode of Locked Up. If you've never seen it, Locked Up is a docu-series that goes to a different prison across the country and follows inmates to give you a taste of prison life. So yes, I am comparing my family vacation to prison life. My son set up a commissary in the backseat of the minivan. He was selling Doritos to the other kids at $0.25 a pop. He also had gum and juice boxes. My daughter started fashioning a shiv out of a Capri Sun straw, and the youngest became the snitch. I quickly elevated to cell block bitch, and my husband was the disgruntled warden. My husband became obsessed with pulling into gas stations and setting a 5-minute timer for restroom breaks. He would set his watch and then scream at us like we were a trained team of Navy SEALs who were propelling out of helicopters on a midnight mission in Peru. On one such stop, I took the kids into the bathroom, but there was only one bathroom in the gas station, and the person who was in there clearly ate some bad gas station sushi. He was tearing it up in there. Finally, he got out, and my kids started using the most unholy of thrones I had ever seen. By the time it was my turn, I saw my husband screaming at the pump, pointing at his watch and demanding we get back in the car. We'd made it about 30 minutes down the road when I told my husband I had to pee. He looked at me and he said, "You're going to have to hold it." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" "I've had 3 children. If you don't find another gas station, I will never hold anything of yours ever again, if you know what I mean." He pulled up the map on his phone and said that there wasn't a gas station for 25 miles. At that point, I made an executive decision to pull over and pee on the side of the road. I pulled into the first dirt road I saw and ran around the minivan. I pulled down my pants and squatted. I made sure to check that I couldn't see the cars passing by on the road. That way, I knew I couldn't, if they couldn't see me, I couldn't see them. The problem was I didn't turn my head in the other direction, and every car that was heading north had a direct view of my anus. And if that wasn't bad enough, the dirt road that I had pulled into on the driveway, the dirt road I had pulled into was a driveway. Just as I was finishing, a woman yelled, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" I shook as I didn't have any toilet paper, and I pulled up my pants and jumped back into Rhonda like I was Cousin Bo from the Dukes of Hazzard minus the hood sliding antics. We eventually made it to our first stop, the Grand Canyon. Oh, we can stop there. It goes all over sideways into the Grand Canyon. But yeah, I did urinate in some woman's driveway in Utah, and she saw the entire thing.
And you're famous, so now she knows exactly who it was.
Well, I don't know, but she was angry. She was angry.
So how does your family feel about being in your book and the subject of your material and everything like that?
They kind of go with the flow of things. They are pretty laid back, as they have. The weird thing is, now looking at this, because it's been 6 years since I started this journey, people have watched my family grow up. They've watched my kids grow up. It's a very odd thing when you think about it. Like, I stopped the other day and somebody had sent me a screenshot from 5 years ago on a post that I did, and my kids are tiny. Mm-hmm. And now I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary student. And things have changed because they do get the option to tell me, "No, don't post that," or "No, we are not going to talk about this," because things get a little more private, and I can respect that. There are stories I've wanted to talk about with my oldest son, but he's just said no. It was a hard pass, and I was like, okay, no problem. So there are a couple of things that stayed out of the book because they weren't necessarily my story to tell, even though I'm the mom and I feel like I was involved, and it's like, nope, it's my story. So they get a choice. They got to read what was in here, and I did ask them, is all of this okay? And everybody was okay with it. My husband didn't read my first book. I don't think he'll read this one. Don't think he'll read the third, if there's a third. He also knows how open I am about everything, and it's been his choice to stay off camera because he feels like this is my space and this is about me, and it's not necessarily about him, even though at times he's directly what we're discussing. But he does sit right off camera, and you can hear his voice, and he does have some input, but they've kind of let me do my thing. And so you will find my kids in videos. We've done a couple of mini series that we've done with different production companies. but for the most part, everybody is a willing participant in what we do.
So you don't get pushback at home, but we touched on very briefly earlier that you certainly get pushback from other people.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that? And I mean, I think for most of us, again, being raised as women in the culture that we're in and everything, I mean, as much as we can try our best to say, you know, no, this is the mother I want to be, this is what's right for me, for my family, all of those things. I mean, it can't feel good to have somebody say you suck as a mom.
No, but I also have learned to understand that the reason they feel that way is because they were given misinformation about what motherhood is supposed to be. Because I'm not saying that I know I have all the answers by any stretch. I am not. This book is not an advice piece for you. This book is advice light at best, because I'm just telling you things that I've done. I'm not necessarily telling you that any of the things that I've learned would necessarily benefit you. Sometimes I do think it would, so I share these pieces for that, but this is not a parenting how-to guide by any stretch. These are my stories. I think we can learn a lot from people's stories. It's how you apply it is totally up to you, because there is no roadmap for parenting. And I think you get handed what? You get handed what to expect when expecting is what my OBGYN gave me in 2005 when I was first pregnant, right? And so you have that, and you're basically told this is your Bible for becoming a mother. And then nobody tells you anything after that, when in fact, everything that's in that book is going to happen to your body, whether you read the book or not. So it's kind of like the thing I didn't really need advice about, which is that my body was going to control this experience anyway. And then everything else that you really need all the help with, I feel like it's tough. The parenting space is tough with books because people want answers and we don't necessarily have them to give you, but what we can do is tell our stories. So anytime I get, and I've gotten really awful things said to me about my parenting, about the way I speak to my kids or about my kids or about my husband, I've learned, number one, I don't spend a lot of time in the comments because, you know, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, cup of coffee, cup of wine, cup of whatever. You know, I'm not. That's not going to happen. And it's not good to dwell in the negative space. So I usually, if somebody takes the time to go that next layer and email me or get directly to me, I will reply. And it's usually with a, you know, have a blessed day type situation. And, you know, or as the Texans say, bless your heart, you know, sweetheart, I hope you have a wonderful day. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time in that space with them because there's nothing positive will come from it. And I know that the reason
comments though, I wanted to make sure, because I know that you have to head off to your next, you know, big showing here. So I wanted to make sure though that everybody who joined us today had an opportunity to ask some questions themselves. So there's two ways to do that. For those of you that are on a regular computer, you can hit the chat box and we will see that, and it's going to come up. If you're on your phone, there should be a little button towards the bottom of your phone that says more. And if you click that, the chat box and other options and stuff for submitting questions will come in. There may also be, depending, I don't exactly know what everybody else is seeing, there may be a little box or an icon that says Q&A, and that's another place that you can submit questions. So either of those places, you are welcome to submit your thoughts, feedback. It doesn't have to be a question, but that would be a way that, because you cannot turn on your mics, as far as I know, but you can submit questions that you may have. And while people are thinking of all those great questions,
and I'll see those right here in this chat bar.
I think so. You're gonna, as long as everything, and there should be a little Q&A, but I'm seeing, I don't know if you see that or if I see that. I know I see it. I don't know if you see it.
I just pulled up, I see chat now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but the one question I wanted to kick things off with is, do you see what you're doing I kind of briefly glossed over the idea of feminism, but we're heading up to a big election cycle and all of that. So do you think of motherhood as being political? Or do you think what you're doing is a political act at all?
Um, so I steer clear in my space of politics because I feel like, uh, especially on Facebook, I'd like to give people a place to go and not have to and be relatively entertained and not have to touch on those topics because it's everywhere. I mean, we're in election year. I'm selling a book in a pandemic in an election year. Like it doesn't get more charged than that, right? And turning 40. So it's like, what else you got for me? You know, like it's a lot. But we have decided that this space is to entertain for community, to give people a space to kind of vent and feel the way that they feel. I think it can be, absolutely, it can be political, but I've just made the choice to not be political. But of course it can. And I see people do it. And I see other female mother comedians do it. It's just not what I'm choosing to do.
Okay. So Trisha Montgomery wrote in, are you going to write another book?
I already have the idea. I already have the working title, and now I just got to pitch it to somebody who wants it. But yes.
Well, judging from, we were talking a little bit before this just started, that your book is doing incredibly well. So I am guessing that if you're willing, it's going to happen.
I'm willing. I have it ready to go. I'm excited.
I mean, that's the good thing about kids is they continue to provide material for you, right? I mean, you got to keep them around for no other reason.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So we had another one. Are you going to have more kids?
I cannot. So no.
Okay.
I told my husband he is welcome to if he chooses to have another family for whatever reason, because he was not willing to get a vasectomy because his words were, I wouldn't want something to happen and then you be deprived of the gifts that I can give you, which is just his complete bogus baby way of getting out of a vasectomy. So I had my tubes tied, but then had to have a hysterectomy. So the shop is officially closed.
It's closed. Alrighty. If your books were to be turned into a Hallmark movie, what actor would you want to play you?
Amber, this is hilarious. Okay. I would totally want Sandra Bullock to play me.
Oh, I could see that.
Totally.
Good answer. Do you get noticed in public?
I do, but people don't know my name. They say you're that lady from Facebook, and then they will reference a video that they've seen. But I have also been confused with Dina Blizzard, who is another female comedian who's hilarious. Her page is One Funny Mother, and I have been confused with, which I didn't see the resemblance, Christina Kuzmic, who has this gorgeous mane of curly hair and is a very pretty, well put together woman. And I always feel bad when people think I'm her because I am such a mess of a person. But anyway, yeah, the short answer is yes, but nobody knows who I actually am.
Do you have a vision for what you want to do once your kids are grown and flowing?
Oh, I want to just continue to talk to women and moms about making sure they know who they are separate from their kids and their spouse.
Okay. What was your favorite part about writing both of your books?
Being blessed to be a storyteller, because I love to tell stories. And so having the opportunity to do that and having people actually want to read them has been mind-blowing.
And speaking of which, the next few comments were all, I don't know if you want to read that. Should I read them out loud or do you want to skip to more questions?
Oh, these are sweet. And those of us that are blessed to be part of your community greatly appreciate that we don't have to get political here. It's a safe space. That's Leslie. I know these women. Yeah, these are my friends. These are wonderful. What do you think we need to do as a community to help break mom guilt? Oh, that's a good one. I just did a video about this the other day. we create a lot of that mom guilt that we feel. So some of it is imposed by society because we then take what's imposed by society, we internalize it, and then in our brains we tell ourselves, you need to feel guilty about this, you need to feel shame about this, and you need to do all of these things because you're not doing enough. And the only way I think that we can break that is by giving ourselves some grace and giving ourselves the ability to say, no, that's not either mine to do or I don't want to do it. But I think we absorb that. And the problem is, so what I will say on that is it's going to take a lot longer to change the social norms that impose that. So what I would do is work on you having the ability to learn how to let yourself say no to things and let yourself be okay with where you are and what you're doing, because that's a real part of motherhood. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, and some of it that I've wondered periodically, and my mom will talk about how truly things were, the all that she had seen before she had a baby were, the pictures of the, the sleeping baby with the, gauzy sort of scene and beautiful white dresses. So did you know it's going to be just blowing out with poop momentarily, that, and so certainly there's been this like more realistic view that your voice has definitely been part of that, other voices. And yet, despite that, I think we still feel this like, that there's a huge picture of June Cleaver sitting, above the mantelpiece that we're still supposed to be doing, even though I feel like we have so many of these voices out there saying, no, this is not who I want to be. This is not what motherhood looks like. It's not good for my kids. It's not good for my spouse. It's not good for me. All of these things. And yet it's still there. Roseanne Barr. I mean, so some of this stuff, we're going back eons, of course, but a substantial amount of time that I feel like this conversation's been rolling and charged in really deep ways about how mothers are unhappy, and yet you're still getting the pushback, and we're still fighting this sort of iconic image of motherhood. Why do you think that is?
I just think that we need to keep doing the things that we're doing to push through it, but like you were talking about June Cleaver, which is actually, I did this video about mom guilt, and I basically played the June Cleaver character, right? I ordered the apron, I did my hair a certain way, I got all dressed, I played mom guilt, and then I played myself. But one of my favorite shows growing up was Married with Children, and Peg Bundy, the way they wrote this mom, right? And there have been some other moms, like the mom from Malcolm in the Middle, and the mom from, even if you go a little bit later on in Modern Family, Claire, there are bits and pieces of characters of these moms where they give them some real hardcore grains of truth, and then they either try to soften them or they try to do something else, right? And I feel like if we keep, or you mentioned, Roseanne, there have been plenty of times when we've been given a picture of a more accurate version of motherhood. And there's always going to be pushback about that or whatever. But I think if we continue to keep doing it and we push the envelope and we continue to be seen and heard, I think that they will, because one of my goals is like to turn this into a sitcom, right? Like I think that stories from here should create a family, a sitcom that comes from that, because to me, the when you put it out there, it's going to have more ability to shape and change the way we think and feel about motherhood. I mean, think about Peg Bundy. When was Married with Children? That was the 90s. And you think about her with her cigarette and her tight clothes and her nonchalant attitude towards her kids and this and that. And, it's a dramatization, right? But there are parts of that. Like me growing up, all of my moms looked like that around the kitchen table at my grandmother's house. They were all smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and yelling at their kids and telling them to go outside and play and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, there are moms who look like the June Cleavers and whatever. But we lie somewhere on the spectrum, mm-hmm. right? We all live somewhere on that spectrum. And I think it's important to keep, pushing the envelope to be seen.
So the last question, I'm actually going to, I think the best way to do our raffle is that if you want to be part of the raffle, I'm trying to think, then just put, if you haven't already commented, several of you have, if you haven't already commented, then put something in the chat box, anything, just I'm here, pick me, love you, whatever it may be. And then that way we'll have a tally of the names and we can just hit the scroll button, or Meredith can, and we'll call somebody out. And then at that point, we're going to need your mailing address. So you're going to have to contact me. I can put my contact information, and then whoever wins can contact me, and we'll make sure it all happens from there. But we have one last question before we do that.
Okay.
What was the most moving story of support that you have ever received?
I have received so many over the years have emailed and messaged me and contacted me, sent me beautiful items that they've made for me, whether it's signs or whatever. I mean, shown up to my meet and greets, my stand-up comedy, just wonderful stories of support. But I can tell you that there is a woman who said that I inspired her to go back to school. She just graduated as a nurse, and she never thought that she would be herself again after having kids, because she felt like she had died to herself. And now she feels like a brand new person, and she thanked me for giving her the courage to go back to school and have a career now in her 40s. And it's just, when I hear stories like that, it blows my mind that that I've had an impact. But I truly believe that you can find yourself again after motherhood and become whatever it is that you want to become, and do whatever it is that you want to do. I've been told no a million ways from Sunday with things I've wanted to do, books I've wanted to write, and I find a way to turn a no into a yes. And it makes me a little bit of a hemorrhoid, but I don't care. I hustle, and I work really hard, and I believe that you can do that. You can, in fact, turn no's into yeses and find who you are to your core. You don't go away when you have kids. You don't die to yourself when you have kids. I believe that's a choice, and you can be exactly who you want to be.
Love that. So we have so many people in the chat saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. And I want you, Meredith, so I don't have to be the bad person here. I hate disappointing people. I wish everybody could get a free copy of the book, because I read it and I loved it. My contact information is in there. So mine is KB Garner, Garner, at IAMAS.com, IAMAS.com, or you can I think almost everybody signed up through Facebook. You can PM me. You can do whatever you need to do. Send a carrier pigeon. I'll be here. And I don't want you to have to put your contact information publicly, but we do need that if we're going to send you a free book. So Meredith.
How many books are we giving? Just one?
We have 2 books to give away.
Okay, well, I'll match your 2, and I'll send 2 as well. So we'll do 4.
4. Okay, 4 books. I'm writing down the names here.
All right, because I hate to disappoint as well.
No.
I'll send 2 as well. So I'm just scrolling, and I'm grabbing, and I am saying that Ashley Reed gets a book. Dora gets a book. Please pick me, Alaska Chick. Who is Alaska Chick? I can't see the name. It just
They
says
can
Alaska.
contact me. So I don't think you even.
Alaska Chick.
As long as Alaska Chick knows, just let us know.
And Laura Fincher.
Okay. So we have Ashley, Dora, Alaska Chick, and Laura Fincher as our winners. And I know that you need to run off, Meredith, because everybody in the world wants to talk to you. But I so wanted to thank you for being with us today and sharing your humor, your insight, your wisdom, and your courageous spirit. I love it.
I appreciate this. This was so wonderful. It was just a great chat and session, and I learned so much in the first part of it, like just listening to all of this information. And I have to tell you, I got goosies when you called me bold. I don't know if anybody's called me bold yet, but I like bold, and I'm gonna keep bold. So that was
Keep
very
bold.
So thank you. I've been called a lot of things.
Other ones that begin with B, maybe.
Other ones that begin with B, but I am keeping bold, and I'm a hold that one. So thank you so much. And I am going to run off now, but thank you very much, everybody here today. I greatly appreciate you and your time.
Thank you so much, Meredith, and I hope you have a wonderful 40th.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye, Meredith.
Bye. And for everybody else, I wanted to thank you again for joining us with Meredith. Do you have any last thoughts, Maki?
Lots of interesting stuff there. And as you know, I mean, I know that you invited me to just provide an initial introduction and just context and a bit of background, just in terms of how this kind of work that Meredith is doing sits in a really broad context and landscape of mothers, of women doing this kind of work. And, you know, I do come from an academic background, so that's kind of the way that I look at these things, and the kind of way that I talk about it. And so I'm really glad that, you know, we got so much time to hear Meredith talk about how she thinks about what she's doing. I don't have anything to say, because I'm more here in case there are questions for me when it comes to just adding a bit of context to what we heard. But there were two main things that I heard recurring over and over again. And one was, you had pointed out when Meredith was talking about this, and she kept pointing like this, the larger structure, so the norms, dominant norms. She talked a lot about that and what that kind of, the imposition of those norms looks like in the lives of women and mothers. And in the academic sense, we talk about that when we study motherhood, we talk about it as the institution of motherhood. So it was really clear in how she was talking and in her work, and the work of all of these moms in comedy who are active in the industry. They all point to how habitual it is for it to be made allowable for the selfhood of women and mothers to slip in all kinds of ways. When she was making that distinction between how boys grow up and how boys are socialized into boyhood and manhood versus how girls are socialized into girlhood and womanhood and all these roles, it's really about how the humanity of boys and men and their selfhood, like their personhood, remains central throughout. And for girls and women, it's there, but there are all kinds of ways that our culture says it's there, but there are all these allowances for it to slip along the way. And we rationalize that in various ways.
I think we see some of that in the fact that it's still not taboo for men to not have kids, but for women, there's still, for women who, whether it's a choice or it's not a choice for them, remain child-free, experience that not having kids so differently. And I think that's right there, tells you a lot about what women are facing in terms of that adoption of motherhood as being sort of mandatory to one's identity. It's the central feature, and the rest can sort of circle around it. But if that's not in place, and not in place well, and executed well, then it's a totally different category. I mean, well, we were not going to get political, so I'm not going to go the direction that I was thinking. But exactly that, where we see our leaders, and even in Hollywood and all of that, the difference there. It's fascinating to me to see that from both sides, as a mother myself, but then also obviously as an academic.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing about politics came up often today, and yeah, I mean, we can. I know what folks are saying in terms of spaces where we don't explicitly address politics. At the same time, everything we're discussing is political. Doing dishes is political. and who does dishes and how often
right
is political.
I agree with
you. Oh, I know. Yeah.
Party, right. So we're not talking Democrat, Republican, Labor, any of those sorts of things. But
and right. And so, yes, for sure. We can say, hey, for the purposes of this specific discussion, we won't kind of explicitly address those elements of electoral politics, right, and all of that. But it is important to note that almost everything Meredith was talking about is a political kind of dynamic. And I do want to note that, because that's one of the important contributions that feminists have made, mm-hmm, to in terms of progressing us in all of these issues. The pointing out that the things that we often think are just so personal to us and kind of random things, and this is just, it just happens to be my daily lived reality because of the particular kind of personality that I have, and the things that I've chosen for myself, and that sort of thing. And then again, you saw that link to politics is there, because when Meredith talks about that and then goes like this, she's making a direct link between these kind of day-to-day funny realities, some of them not so funny, that she's talking about, and the structure and the dominant norms and policy and all these things which we've chosen to kind of not address explicitly today, but they're always hovering in the background.
Well, and I think that's what comedy does, right? Is it permits that sort of entry point into what is a political conversation without, but the humor, you're of course much better at articulating the what happens in that moment of when you're not naming names, but naming the anger, naming the frustration, naming the feminist fight, naming all of those different things. But then the comedy, you're still calling out truth. I mean, the image of the jester, all of those things, that they can be the truth sayers in these things. But because it's funny, you're not going to get the same backlash as if a politician were to sort of say the same things and be expecting policy to come out of it, or something along those lines. That there's that shift there. But then we also saw recently, I don't know if you saw it as much in Canada, but and I might mangle this name, the Jim Gaffigan, is that the male comic, and he does a lot with fatherhood, and has the 5 kids and everything. And he just opened up on Trump during all of that on Twitter. But he did get a lot of pushback because he's known as sort of the apolitical, sort of person, even though he brings in, obviously various things. And, he said, no, I mean, I've always been political. It's, just a matter of, again, naming names now, but that it's an unrealistic expectation. And he kind of went through all of that. But it's interesting to me that we expect that of our politicians, maybe because we don't want too much anger with our comedy. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? We expect which part of our politicians versus our comics?
That we don't expect, I think, I mean, certainly some people have made their bread and butter off of being political, whether it was, some of the SNL stuff, Colbert is certainly not shied away, Jon Stewart, all of those. I mean, there's certainly a long history of political humor, but that when we talk about specifically parenthood, but I think even comedy routines in general, have, that they tend to sidestep politics, even though it is political. I mean, trying to justify that, how do you, because we're both, I think, of the same thought that motherhood is political, no matter what, it is a political act. And yet there you are, saying, but I'm not going to talk about politics here, is interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's about how we understand what politics is.
Yeah.
So there's a mainstream understanding of what politics is or what it means to be political. And a lot of times in a kind of more general common use sense, the understanding of being political is directly linked to discussing electoral politics,
Right.
talking about a particular sort of party and party platforms and that sort of thing. Excuse me. And then there's the understanding, the broader, more holistic understanding that that more accurately represents what a political thing is. And that's the one that we are accustomed to using as academics and in our writing and in our talking and in our activism, which understands that all these things are connected. So someone like Gaffigan, when he says, well, he's always been political, it's because the way that he's telling, his way of storytelling has political dynamics in it when he's talking about things, right? But a general audience might, as you said, think that that's apolitical because no politician has been mentioned and no political party has been mentioned. But if someone, for instance, like Meredith or any other mom comic is humorously talking about unpaid labor and the dynamics of unpaid labor in their home, or the way that their kids and perhaps their partner or their spouse too don't seem to see the importance of that woman's selfhood as having to be front and center all the time, those are political comments.
So last question for you. What would you like to see in terms of how female comics are talked about, mother comics specifically, talked about, or what would you like to see changed in the industry, or how would you like that sort of conversation to be better, different, anything kind of in that realm? What would you like to see as we're moving forward talking about mother comics?
They are doing it themselves. And so the question, what I really appreciate about what's happening is that it's not about how producers or the industry should be thinking about them or what they should be saying about them, because they are telling them how it should be. And they're telling them through the work. And I really like that. It's no longer about please, please, and going to the industry with a begging bowl, as has been the case for too long, because it just was set up that way. Right. So now that the sociocultural sphere in both Canada and the US has opened up in ways in the past 10 to 15 years that were still a bit unusual prior to that. And that's due to social movements, that's due to feminist ideas being more mainstreamed, anti-racist ideas being more mainstreamed, just notions of equity entering the mainstream more visibly. And so that has opened up a little bit areas of the industry that have allowed people who have, they were already actively working and writing and working in television, in all of these mediums. But that opening up has made it possible for those people to just do what they do.
Right.
And so with all of the issues and shortcomings around a platform like Netflix, for instance, it's not perfect. And it's been called to task on a number of issues. At the same time, you're seeing that as being one of the platforms that has given numerous mom comics 1-hour specials, which are not easy to get. And so to see that there, and to see that there's an audience for that, and that it's a mainstream audience. These are no longer people who have just a Facebook channel or a YouTube channel, right? This is a large mainstream audience, and it's popular, and the audience is diverse.
Well, that's one of the things that I frequently point out, when we talk about motherhood stuff in general, anything that has to do with, it's like, well, look at it, women are half the population. 86% of women have babies. The odds are in our favor here. I mean, we are a huge demographic. And, I think that, to echo a little bit earlier, regardless of political beliefs and all those things and I certainly see how race and class and all those things can certainly be wedges and create differences in how we experience motherhood. I think there is a unifying quality to what it is to be a mother, regardless of where you live and all those things, just in our sheer, the matrescence sort of thing, that movement of becoming an individual and into a mother is something astounding, that I think that shared experience is something that can be a jumping off point, and a place of potential. And that's something that I think comedy does well, is, creates that sort of unity and, like, oh, we're all laughing together. We all recognize the humor in this. We all recognize that moment of, that happened to me too, sort of thing. And that's beautiful, I think. I like that.
Yeah. And the old school, excuse me, I have this bronchial issue I've been dealing with. The old school sexist attitudes in the comedy industry, which are still present, have said that women aren't funny, and that there's a very small niche for maternal humor. Just other mothers. Who else is going to want to listen to this stuff? So number one, it's not funny because women inherently aren't funny, supposedly. Motherhood is just not a funny topic, supposedly. And only other mothers will want to listen to this. So why invest in it? It's just not a moneymaker. So those were some of the strong attitudes and assumptions that really contributed to the exclusion and the real difficulty of women and mothers in this industry being able to make a go of it. But we're seeing, again, if I point back to those Netflix specials, we're seeing that is not the case. The audience for that kind of humor is very diverse. The humor itself is so witty. So this idea that you can be talking about motherhood, but in doing that, you're also hitting all of these different sociocultural elements that are of interest to a broad audience. And obviously we're seeing it. It's happening. It's there. It's making money. People love it. People are asking for it.
Right. Well, and I think we both saw, all the chats, the thank you. And, that it's not just humor and funniness, which we all need, particularly now, I think, but also that sense of identifying the pain and identifying the struggle in it can be so reassuring to so many moms. So I certainly thank Meredith. I wish you were here so I could thank her again, but I thank you as well for your time and your insight. And I wish you the best of luck with your book. And I
you.
know Meredith well, and I hope anybody out there who needs the link follows the link that we've posted so that they can buy a book for themselves and keep her rolling, because we need more voices like hers out there. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much, Katie.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.